Germany's election has left the country and the rest of Europe facing potentially complex negotiations to forge a new coalition government, and it's still unclear who will replace Angela Merkel when she steps down as Chancellor. Outgoing Finance Minister Olaf Scholz and his Social Democrats have a narrow lead, which could mean the formation of a centre-left coalition made up of three parties, a new departure in Germany. But so far, Conservative Armin Laschet is still clinging on to his ambition to lead the country. So on this special edition of To The Point, we ask, Germany has voted a fresh start or more of the same? And to talk about the election and how it impacts Germany's international standing, I'm joined here in the studio by Shani Rozanes, Deutsche Welle Middle East analyst. Also with us is Matthew Karnitschnig, Chief Europe Correspondent for Politico. And a very warm welcome too to French-born Emmanuelle Chaze, who reports on European affairs for DW and France 24. And I'd like to begin with you, Emmanuelle, if I might. Tell me what has caught your eye, what has intrigued you most in the recent days and weeks of this election campaign?
Well, during the campaign is definitely the fact that very little was talked about when it came to international policies and the EU. It came very, very late in the campaign, as if Germany was really just preoccupied with internal matters and not international affairs. That's what really surprised me the most. OK, we'll talk about that in a little bit. I'd just like to begin, though, with the question is this election shaping up to give Germany a new era of opportunity or a new period of uncertainty?
Definitely the second, definitely uncertainty, even if just for the weeks, months to come until we reach an agreement between the parties which will lead the coalition. We still absolutely do not know, which coalition that will be, and that will definitely affect the relation between Germany and the other countries, especially the other European countries, because they used to really rely on Germany and on Angela Merkel's Germany for a stable ally, and right now Germany is entering a period of uncertainty, and I think that's going to be quite unsettling for Germany's allies in the weeks, months to come.
It was said approvingly of Angela Merkel recently that she was the woman who kept the EU on the road, kept the show on the road. Matthew, let's take a quick look at and listen to the two candidates who are still vying for to become Germany's next leader. First, Olaf Scholz of the Social Democrats, and then Armin Laschet of the Conservative Christian Democrats.
Many citizens of this country have chosen the SPD because they want to see a change of government and they want the new Chancellor to be Olaf Scholz. We will do everything we can to build a government under the leadership of the CDU. Because Germany needs a coalition for the future, one that will modernize our country.
Matthew, which of the two candidates is in the driving seat, will you say, at this point in time?
I would say that Scholz is clearly in the driver's seat because he won the election. And I think most people would look at this and say it's pretty clear that somebody who took his party from 15% to over 25% has succeeded, whereas Laschet, who took his party from 33% the last time to its worst result since World War II.
The numbers are absolutely conclusive.
Yes,
so what's going on?
Well, I think it's mainly tactical. I think it is possible, in theory, for the CDU to lead the next government. I don't think that any person standing outside would say that they have a clear mandate, but I think part of what Laschet is doing is he wants to weaken the SPD as much as possible by holding out this option for the other two smaller parties there to give them a bit of leverage in their negotiations with the SPD. And if the SPD at the end of the day succeeds, as I suspect, in building a coalition with the two smaller parties, they're probably going to have to make many more concessions than they would want because they've got Laschet over there holding out all kinds of goodies to the two parties. So it's very tactical, I think, at the end.
Okay. And what has gone wrong with Germany's Conservatives, with the CDU, CSU, Angela Merkel's Conservatives, after all, a huge slump in their fortunes?
Well, I think what's gone wrong is that they don't have Merkel there. Merkel was responsible for about a third of the voters, according to all of the polling. When she goes to the wayside, they lose a third of their votes. The other problem is, and this is why I kind of disagree with Emmanuelle on this point, is that I don't think this is unstabling for Germany or for Europe. I think it's probably a pretty positive step that after 16 years of having one party in power, it looks like there's going to be a change. I mean, that's a healthy democracy, and you don't want to have a situation where you have the same party dominating, you know, over generations.
Well, actually, I think the people that are in the driver's seats now are the leaders of the Green Party and the FDP. I mean, we're talking Linda and Baerbock. I mean, and there's some poetic justice in it, in a sense, because they're also representing the younger generation of German voters. That is, because of demographic reasons, actually underrepresented in the caucus in general, and they are trying very much. They have an exaggerated power, they have great leverage, and that might actually help bring Germany forward and bring on the changes that are so necessary. And I agree with you in that aspect.
The modernisation that everybody is talking about, and you know, the overdue modernisation.
Exactly, and we see that the traditional voters of the SPD and the CDU, they are not so keen on these changes yet, because they very much voted for more of the same. But the younger generation is kicking in, saying, no, we want more change. And it seems like they might be able, in this constellation, to actually have the leverage necessary to make it happen.
Emmanuelle.
When I was saying that Germany would enter a period where this would be unsettling for its allies, it's just because there will be a coalition talks and there will be no clear government. So I think that's unsettling in any country. And indeed, change is coming, and that's probably a good thing for Germany. And this is not the change that is unsettling, it's the fact that there will be months of negotiations to form a government. And on the second point, can I please just finish my sentence? On the second point, on Armin Laschet, he's not well seen on the international stage for his many gaffes around the campaign. Even up to the last day of the campaign, he showed his vote. He folded his ballot paper the other way around. He's continuously made such gaffes. It might be nothing, but it also shows that maybe he's fit to be a regional leader, but it seems that he just doesn't, have the aura that Angela Merkel used to have, and he doesn't really justify himself the right way either when he says, oh, that shouldn't have happened. But when you lead a campaign on continuously, this shouldn't have happened, that shouldn't have happened, it just doesn't bode well for a chancellery.
And Shani, you were just, if I may make so bold, dissing the Social Democrats a wee little bit, presenting them almost as a sort of an old-style party, old-school party.
Well, they had an amazing comeback, yeah.
They must be getting something right. The comeback is the phoenix from the ashes. They're there again. They were on 14%.
Right. Well, I think they had a stronger candidate than the CDU, the main contenders.
Olaf Scholz.
Yes, indeed. But I think there was a lot of strategic voting going on. I think there were we know for a fact there were many undecided voters who made their decision very much in the last minute, because it was exactly that. But if we look at these people, these are the people who were happy with Merkel, were happy with the GroKo, with the Grand Coalition that been shaping. The politicians don't like it, but the voters seem to have liked it enough to bring us to a position where it is again possible, and it needs to remain on the table as well. If we want to have, if Laschet or Scholz, either one of them wants to be able to get Linda and Baerbock, the Greens and the FDP in, they need to have an alternative that excludes them in order to have some leverage in this negotiations. I don't think SPD is not relevant. Actually, I think they've shown they can gain their relevance again. And if you look at the parties that made the greatest leap, it's them and the Greens. So this is definitely a step to the left. But it's also, because of the uniqueness of the Merkel era, it's also very much in line with Merkel's policies, who has taken CDU very much to the left and made it very easy for Olaf Scholz to claim himself to be her successor. And it worked for him, seems like it.
Matthew, there's a lot of talk about Germany's next government almost certainly going to be a three-party coalition. That's unprecedented in Germany. It's, as I say, it's being presented as a big deal. Is it a big deal?
No. I mean, I think there is a lot of sort of excitement here because this is sort of virgin territory for Germany. But if you compare Germany to other European countries, this is quite normal. There are three-party coalitions all over the continent. And if you look at these parties, and this is why I reject this idea that this is somehow a period of instability, this coalition building. I mean, if you look at what goes on in Israel after an election, or you know, even in neighboring Austria, there's always a lot of horse trading going on here. Europeans are used to this. The parties that we're talking about here have been you know, with the exception of the Greens, but have been running Germany since World War II. There's going to be a lot of stability here. They're all pro-European. They're all firmly kind of embedded in the transatlantic alliance. None of them want to pull out of NATO or anything like that. So I think you will see continuity here. At the end of the day, you know, we're talking about shades of gray. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not talking about Germany going off potentially into some completely new direction. Whatever form this next coalition takes, whether it's led by the CDU or the SPD.
Mm. Shani, the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, a word on their fortunes and where they're heading now.
Well, I've seen yesterday a lot of people finding comfort in the fact they did not grow stronger, which is quite a distorted comfort, I'd say. It's not the right approach to that. The fact that we're seeing is that AfD is there, the right wing is there, extreme right wing is there, and it's staying. It's not going anywhere. And especially if you look at two particular regions where they're very strong, which is Thuringen and Saxony. They are
two states in the east of Germany.
And the strategy of just ignoring the AfD, hoping they will disappear, it's not working. And I doubt it will work. It's quite typical to German politics, I have to say, definitely under the last 16 years of hoping things that you ignore will just disappear, will go away. It's not going away, and it's troubling. It's very much troubling.
Well, I agree that it's troubling, but at the same time, if you look at France, for example, where the far-right fares actually much better than the far-right here in Germany, I'd say it's a European issue more than it is just a German issue there. And we will see with the French elections next year just how high will the far-right fare. But I think there's much more of a worry in France than it is here in Germany at the moment. But otherwise, I agree that it's not going away.
I actually think it's encouraging because the AfD lost support compared to the last election. And you're right, they're not going anywhere, but they're not going anywhere in Europe. I mean, once these parties get embedded in a political system, it's very hard to do away with them completely. And you know, there were a couple of prominent candidates who didn't do as well as many people feared from the AfD. So I think overall, obviously not good to have this quasi-fascist party in the German parliament, but at the same time, it could have been a lot worse if you look at France and other countries.
And for all we can say about the AfD, the far right, I mean, there's still no other party which will work with them in the parliament as it stands.
Yeah, that's a good thing, but I think it's also another indicator. You were asking at the beginning of the show what was something remarkable. I think what we can see from the result is that the COVID, has not really played much of a role. This was a ticket that the AfD was trying to use in order to get more votes. They didn't seem to have, managed to leverage that. And in general, if you look at the discussion, I mean, I don't think the CDU failure or has anything to do directly with Corona. I think it's mostly about the weak candidate that they put forth, and I don't think it has anything, which is probably a good thing about the ability of Germany to have dealt with the virus and to move on from it, hopefully.
All the more surprising that that's, as you put it, weak candidate is persevering at this point in time. I can't, it doesn't add up for me quite, yeah. Emmanuelle?
Yeah, and also the far right hasn't, like, they had campaigned, they always campaign also on immigration, and immigration has absolutely not been a theme in this campaign. It hasn't been debated, you know, by the main candidates, by the Social Democrats, the Conservatives, the Greens. So it's also a major difference with what we see happening in France when there's a huge debate around immigration, a huge debate around Islam even, and this was absolutely not on the cards here in Germany, which was a massive difference for me.
Well, you were asking about how Laschet is persevering. We need to keep in mind one of the biggest problems he's going to have now is internally within his party. Markus Söder, who was his rival throughout this campaign, maybe for too long, as many people in the party now claim. When we hear voices this morning of CDU politicians, they blame the infighting for weakening the party. I guess they have these arguments do have some merit. But that is not over. It's quite clear that CSU, led by and Söder, are not going to make life easy for Laschet, for the CDU in general, CSU, sorry. It's going to still be very tight, and he needs to get them in, you know, to back him very strongly if he wants to somehow use the little, you know, theoretical chance he has to form a coalition.
Well, I think they would back him if they think he has a chance of becoming chancellor, but that seems to be a long shot at this point. And, I mean, if we're honest, I mean, Laschet is probably done, right? I mean, he's going to go through the motions here. He's going to, you know, as I said before, try and make life as difficult as possible for the SPD. But if he doesn't become chancellor, it's only a matter of time before somebody puts a knife in his back in the CDU. He's going to have to step down as leader of the CDU. Again, he's just recorded the worst result for the party since World War II. He's not going to survive that. He'll be lucky to survive as premier of North Rhine-Westphalia.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned it already. Let's change gear a little bit. Foreign policy, international policy was hardly on the agenda during the election campaign. Is Germany so isolationist?
Germany isn't isolationist, but I think that Merkel has succeeded in shielding the population for much of the last 16 years from issues beyond its borders and reassuring people that she'll take care of it and everything will be okay. I also think that, you know, these parties aren't that different when it comes to foreign policy. If you're talking about policy towards Russia, Nord Stream 2, these types of things, most of these parties support going forward with that very controversial project. If you think about China, doing business with China, the two main parties are basically on the same page, transatlantic relations. You know, the only party that really deviates on a lot of these issues of these larger parties are the Greens. And for them, I'm not sure that it's a real vote getter to go out and start saying, you know, that we need to have a more confrontational relationship towards Russia, for example, which isn't popular in Germany amongst the general population, or even China, given how much business Germany does with China. So, you know, these are issues that are not vote getters, as I say. So they ended up staying by the wayside, and the same is true for Europe. I mean, they all generally want more European integration. They placed accents in different places, but overall, there are not much differences between the parties.
And Biden's going to have to make I mean, it seems like Biden's policy is going to have to push them to taking a stand. It's not going to be so easy to remain neutral in a way. You know, Trump's presidency, in a way, let Europe. In one way, it brought reckoning that Europe needs to have more control of its own foreign policy, but at the same time, it also made it easier to just do whatever you want and not trust America in a way. And now that Biden's taking the lead again,
I think
Germany,
he's actually given up on the Germans.
Germany as such a major force in Europe.
Did you hear his comment when he was told what the results were, the provisional results, and he said, "I'll be darned." Yeah.
Well, they're going to have to take a stand, and they have to be more bold, and it might become a very contested issue in Germany because it does jeopardize a lot of the commerce and the business aspect of Germany now, not to mention energy supply when it comes to Russia. And I'm not sure. I think these good days of letting it just slide are over.
I disagree, because I think Germany has actually been very successful in playing both sides of the issue. With Russia, for example, with Nord Stream 2, they'll agree to impose sanctions on Russia at the same time that they're doing gas pipeline deals. The same is true of China. They'll criticize China over the treatment of the Uyghurs. At the same time, they're negotiating investment pacts with them. Merkel's flying to China with a delegation of CEOs. At the same time, we've seen the crackdown in Hong Kong. And that's been a formula that has worked.
Is Biden going to agree to that much longer?
Convince them to back away from it. I don't think so, because the United States needs Germany as a place for its military operations. It has a substantial basis here, and that's the trade-off.
We've touched on how this might be going down in Brussels, EU headquarters. We've also talked a little bit about the US. What about Israel? How are people in Israel likely to be seeing developments around the election in Germany?
Well, Israelis love Germany to be stable, and I think that other than the immediate period of coalition building, it's quite sure it's going to be, you know, as Matthew mentioned, these are well-established, long-known parties. So in that aspect, and which don't differ on their issue when it comes to Israel. They don't really take any stand, unlike what we're seeing now with the Democrats in the States, where Israel is becoming such a contentious issue.
In recent years and decades, Israel has had no better friend. It is often said, and more or less plausibly, than Angela Merkel.
True, but it doesn't seem like there's any reason and any ground for worry for now. Neither Laschet or Scholz will take any stand that is much different than that. I mean, I think this is one of Merkel's biggest achievements as a legacy, is just cementing that relationship with Israel in such a way that it's really, it's never been as strong and warm as before. But it's I think the bigger question would be the Middle East in that aspect of Palestinians, and what happens with that. Will the new leadership try to be more active in that?
Germany is completely marginalised.
Exactly. But now, in general, the Palestinian issue has become, in recent years, far more, set to the side when it comes to policy with Israel and with the Arab world in general. You see what's happening. For many years, it was sort of like what's stopping a lot of countries from, in the Arab world, from breaking greater ties with Israel was the Palestinian issue. It is no longer that. And the Palestinians need to find some way in order to bring their, to get more lobbying and more allies on their side. And they're just very, very weakened right now. So it's not really an issue that is important enough to set, the agenda on either countries. Actually,
Emmanuelle, take us to the French capital, Paris. What's going on there, and how are people viewing developments in Germany?
Well, no reaction from Emmanuel Macron so far, but again, those coalition talks that we are bound to be seeing, where there will be two kingmakers, the FDP and the Greens, might really significantly change the relation between France and Germany, between Paris and Berlin. If you take the FDP, if they manage, for example, to get the finance minister, the FDP has become nearly an Eurosceptic party right now. They also don't want to increase the common debt, the common EU debt, which is something that was actually, advocated for by France. If you take the Greens, for example, there will be issues on climate policies. The Greens are, in France, you don't talk about the exit from nuclear power. In Germany, the Greens will want to go towards greener energies. They won't bring back nuclear. So all those issues, if the Greens are part of a coalition, if the FDP are part of a coalition, are going to play a role in how the relationship evolves between Paris and Berlin.
Emmanuel Macron has felt badly let down, I think it's fair to say, by the Germans, by, I think, Chancellor Merkel. Is he going to continue to be badly let down?
It will depend. It will all depend on who will be the next chancellor. But it's true that it's only after 15 years at the head of the country that Angela Merkel finally showed her European side more than her, Germany first side in Europe. And I think Emmanuel Macron was left deeply disappointed by that, especially after his Sorbonne discourse, where he was really hopeful for a more united, more proactive Europe. And it's only towards the end of her mandate that Angela Merkel, and only pressed by a pandemic, that she actually agreed to more European cooperation, to the EU common debt. So, I think this is going to be very interesting to see in the months to come.
Matthew, we began with you telling us that you believe that the Social Democrat candidate Olaf Scholz is going to win, is going to be the next chancellor. What would that mean for Germany's image in the first 100 days or so? What are we looking for there?
Well, I think people will wake up and see, well, actually not that much has changed in Germany. It's the same old Germany we've always known.
Cooperation.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is somebody who really stands in the traditions of the Grand Coalition. He's a moderate in his own party. You know, I think you might see some overtures towards France, towards Macron in particular. He's always talking about how important it is to, you know, achieve more integration, especially within the Eurozone, within the common currency. And he, as finance minister, has a deep background in that, obviously. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see him push those types of issues to show Europe that, you know, Germany is really willing to move the project, as they call it, forward.
You got a final word on that?
Well, yeah, I think if we want to answer the question posed at the beginning of the question, I wouldn't expect too much change. No, it's probably going to be more of the same, maybe slightly different, but very much more of the same.
You heard it here, folks. More of the same. Here on To The Point, we'll be discussing the German election, the initial outcome. We don't have a new chancellor in Germany yet, but the agreement seems to be that it's going to be Olaf Scholz of the Social Democrats. Let's wait and see on that. Thanks for joining us for today. Bye-bye and tschüss.